The locks in my son's house had a particular sound at night, heavier somehow, like even the walls knew to hold their breath. I'd gotten used to sleeping with one ear open. Old habit, maybe. Or instinct. Either way, when I heard the soft click of my bedroom door at 2:30 in the morning, I was already awake. I didn't move. I lay on my side, facing the wall, and kept my breathing slow and even the way you do when you've had time to prepare. The floorboards didn't creak. Sable had learned which ones to avoid weeks ago. I'd noticed. I notice most things people assume I don't. She crossed the room in maybe 4 steps, paused at my dresser. Then came the sound I'd been waiting for, the slide of the top drawer opening, slow and careful, the way someone moves when they're trying not to be caught. Then nothing. Then a sound I hadn't expected, not a gasp, but something lower, a sharp inhale pulled back behind her teeth. And then she was gone. The door clicked shut. Her footsteps moved quickly down the hall, this time no longer careful. I reached over and turned on the lamp. On my nightstand sat my reading glasses and a library book about container gardening. In the open drawer, a decoy envelope marked Bank. Do not lost. A handful of rubber-banded receipts, and the small digital recorder I'd bought at the office supply store on Clement Street, still running. I closed the drawer, folded my hands over the blanket, and waited for morning. I had arrived 6 months before with a rolling suitcase, a canvas bag of medications, and the kind of careful optimism you carry when you've just been told your heart showed some irregularities, and your doctor used the phrase, "take it easy," 3 times in one appointment. My son Dex had called before I even got home from the cardiologist. "Mom, just come, we have the room. The kids want you close." I could hear Sable in the background, her voice bright and certain. "Tell her we insist." I had my own apartment then, a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building I'd lived in for 11 years. I knew the super's name, the mail carrier's route, which neighbors played music too loud on Friday nights. I liked my life. But the doctor's voice stayed in my ear, and Dex sounded so sure, and I told myself, 3 months, just until things settle, just to be careful. I offered $750 toward utilities. Sable said no at first, then yes after a week. I didn't blame her. Money is complicated when it comes from family. For the first few weeks, things were easy. I made breakfast on weekday mornings so she didn't have to before her shift. I walked their daughter Piper to the bus stop and picked up their son Teddy from soccer twice a week. I cleaned the bathrooms without being asked. I brought home groceries and refused to let them pay me back. Sable was warm then. She hugged me when I came in from errands, asked about my doctor appointments, called me by my first name, Marlene, in a way that felt like affection. By the 2nd month, the warmth had a draft in it. Small things first. She began refolding the dish towels I'd already folded, said she had a system, mentioned once, twice, 3 times that the kids had a particular way they liked their lunches. I adjusted. Then she started adding her grocery list to the counter with items already crossed off that she'd bought herself, a subtle reminder of who ran the household. When I made pot roast on a Sunday, something I'd been making since Dex was 9, she served it to the kids and whispered to him while they ate. "Too heavy, I think. My mother's recipe is lighter." I wasn't meant to hear, but I did. The patio dinners stopped including me around week 7. I'd hear them laughing through the sliding door, the kids' voices lifting in the evening air, and I'd stand at the kitchen sink and dry the same dish twice without realizing. Sable started locking the study, said it was for work, confidential files, said it nicely, always said things nicely. Then I noticed other things. My good wool cardigan, the dark green one I'd worn to my sister's retirement party, went missing from the hall closet. A bottle of my prescription eye drops felt significantly lighter than it should have been for something I'd barely used. A $20 bill I'd left on the dresser for the dry cleaner was gone by the time I went back for it. Sable suggested I must have spent it and forgotten. Maybe I left the cardigan at the doctor's office. Maybe I was mixing up the eye drops with the ones from last month. Maybe. I didn't argue, but I started paying attention differently. I kept a small spiral notebook in the pocket of my robe. I began writing things down. Dates, items, what was said. The first entry read, October 4th, green cardigan, last seen hall closet, not returned. I didn't show it to Dex. He was working 60-hour weeks, and when I caught him for a moment in the kitchen, he'd smile at me with tired eyes and say, "You doing okay, Mom?" And I'd say yes because anything else would take more of him than he had to give. So I watched, and I wrote, and I waited. The thing about Sable was that she was never obvious. That was what took me so long to name what was happening. She didn't steal in ways that left clear marks. She chipped. A small amount from my wallet here, a personal item there, a story she'd tell the children that quietly repositioned me. Your grandma gets confused sometimes. She means well, in ways that were gentle enough to deflect and pointed enough to land. I started noticing the looks, too. The way she'd watch me from across the kitchen when I was talking to the kids. Eyes measuring, not unkind exactly, but calculating in a way that made me feel like an equation she was working through. I moved my valuables into a zippered pouch I kept in my bra. Old habit from a trip to Naples in 1987. Came back useful. I locked my bedroom door when I showered. Started keeping my medication in my nightstand rather than the bathroom cabinet. Counted my pills the way I'd never had to before. I still believed, foolishly, that naming it would fix it. That if I just said the right thing at the right moment, Sable would stop. That Dex would see. That things would level off the way uncomfortable seasons sometimes do, by waiting long enough. I stopped believing that the day I found my jewelry box. It was a Wednesday in late November. I'd opened it to find my watch for a doctor's appointment. Not an expensive watch, just silver and thin and 40 years old. A gift from my mother the Christmas. She was already sick but didn't tell us yet. The watch was in its usual place, but the small velvet tray underneath, where I kept a pair of pearl earrings and a thin gold ring my husband had given me before we were married. That tray was empty. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. Then I went to find Sable. She was in the kitchen, making coffee, and she turned with a smile when she heard me come in. I described the earrings, the ring. She tilted her head and said, thoughtfully, "You don't think you might have put them somewhere else when you were tired? You've been under so much stress, Marlene. Could you have taken them off somewhere and forgotten?" The smile never moved. I said I didn't think so. She said maybe we should look together later. She never mentioned it again. That night, I opened the notebook and wrote one sentence. She knows exactly what she's doing. After that, I stopped looking for the things that went missing. I started looking for proof. It was a Thursday afternoon in late January when I stopped at the small market on the way home from my cardiologist and bought a scratch-off ticket on impulse. I must have been in a particular mood, defiant maybe, or just needing the small ceremony of it, something that was only mine. I scratched it in the car with the engine running and the heat clicking on. $4,600. I read it again. Held the ticket up to the light like I was checking for fine print. I sat there for a long time. It wasn't a life-changing amount, but it was enough to matter. Enough to mean something that had never been about anyone else. I didn't tell Dex, didn't mention it at dinner. Went to bed early and lay in the dark thinking about what it would feel like to have a door that was fully mine again. The next morning, I made the mistake of calling the lottery claims line from the hallway while I thought the house was empty. I was on hold for 4 minutes. When I hung up, Sable was in the kitchen doorway, coffee mug in hand, expression unreadable, and said, "Morning, Marlene. Sleep okay?" Just that. But her eyes said the rest. I spent the afternoon quietly making decisions. That evening, after the kids were in bed and Dex had fallen asleep on the couch with his reading glasses still on, I went to my room and sat at the edge of the desk with a blank piece of paper. I wrote claims, notice, do not misplace across the top, folded it into an envelope, and sealed it with nothing inside. I set it in the drawer of my nightstand in plain view, weighted down with a few rubber-banded receipts to give it shape and consequence. Then I reached behind the stack of books on my shelf and retrieved the small digital voice recorder I'd purchased at the office supply store 2 weeks prior. I'd been keeping it running during the mornings when I was out of the room. I'd already captured 3 conversations I hadn't been meant to hear. I checked the battery, full. I set it inside the drawer, just behind the envelope. Running. Then I went to the bathroom, removed the lottery ticket from the zippered pouch, folded it into thirds, and tucked it back where no one would think to look. I returned to bed. My hands were steady. My chest felt the way it does just before a storm. Not afraid of the lightning, just aware that something is about to shift. At 2:17 a.m., my door opened. She was in and out in under a minute. But 60 seconds is long enough. I let her go. Listened to her footsteps move back down the hall. Then I got up, put on my robe, and walked to Dex's door. He answered on the second knock, groggy and alarmed. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said. "But I need you to come to my room. There's something I want to show you." He followed me in and sat in the desk chair, confused, rubbing his face. Sable appeared in the doorway 30 seconds later, arms crossed, already composing her expression into concern. She'd changed into a different shirt. I noticed. "I want you both to hear this," I said, and pressed play on the recorder. The first clip was from a Tuesday morning in December. Sable on the phone, her voice low and deliberate, the way it gets when she thinks the house is empty. The words were plain. She has more than she's saying. She's been talking about savings, and I found statements in a magazine she left out. I just need a little more time. Dex looked at the recorder, then at her. The second clip was from a morning in January. Sable again, different call. "I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending this works." She's like a stone around the whole thing, and Dex won't see it because he never sees it. Dex set down his hands. He said her name very quietly. "I can explain," she started. "Let me finish," I said. I reached into the folder I prepared, the one I'd kept under the mattress for 3 weeks, and removed the first page. It was a printout of a text thread, screenshots I'd taken from Dex's phone one afternoon when he'd asked me to check a message while his hands were full. He hadn't known what was in the thread. Sable had been texting a man I didn't recognize, arranging to meet on 2 separate weekday mornings when she was supposedly working from home. I set the printout on the desk. Sable's face did something complicated. She took a step forward and then stopped. I removed the second page. Bank statements, my own, with 3 months of $40 and $60 withdrawals highlighted in yellow. Amounts I hadn't made. I'd verified each one with the bank. The teller had been very understanding. The third page was a letter, notarized from my own attorney. It outlined, in precise language, the items I could document as having gone missing since my arrival. It also named Sable specifically and noted that I had retained counsel and was prepared to act. Dex read the letter to the bottom. His jaw moved, but he didn't speak for a long time. Sable said, "She's been building a case against me since she got here. This is what she does, Dex. This is who she is. She came in here to divide us and she's done it, and you can't see it because—" "What?" he said. His voice was very flat. "Because I trust my mother?" She stopped. The room was quiet in the way that large things are quiet when they've already fallen and the dust is still settling. I stood. I kept my voice even. "I came here because you asked me to. I contributed what I could. I never asked for anything beyond a place to recover. And I'm telling you now, clearly, that what's been happening in this house is not something I'm willing to continue enduring quietly." I looked at Sable, not with anger, just steadily. "I kept records," I said, "because I knew eventually I'd need them." Sable left the room. I heard her in the kitchen for a while, drawers opening, the tap running, the sounds of someone who needs to do something with her hands when there's nothing left to say. Dex sat in the desk chair for a long time after she left. He didn't look at me with apology exactly, more like a person standing in a room they thought they knew, slowly understanding the walls are different than they thought. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he said finally. "Because you needed to see it yourself," I said. "And now you have." The apartment above the quilt shop on Madera Street cost $870 a month, had 2 south-facing windows and a radiator that hissed like it had opinions. I took it the same week I filed the police report. The claims office for the lottery sent a direct deposit within 10 days. I used a portion for first month, last month, and a deposit on the space next door that had a hand-lettered "For Lease" sign and "Good afternoon" light. I'd been a florist for 22 years before I retired. I know what to do with a room that gets afternoon light. I painted the walls a soft cream, brought in the work table from storage, put herbs in terracotta pots along the sill, rosemary, lemon thyme, a small bay laurel I'd been keeping alive since before Dex was born. I didn't name the shop right away. Names take a while to earn. The first weeks were quiet in a way that took some getting used to. No one walked past my door in the night. No one rearranged my towels. I could leave a 20 on the counter and find it exactly where I'd left it. I slept deeply for the first time in months. Dex called on a Thursday, 9 days after I left. He was brief and careful with his words in the way people are when they've been rehearsing. He said he'd asked Sable to leave for a while, that they were in counseling, that he was sorry. He used the word specifically, deliberately, for not seeing it sooner. I said I appreciated him saying so. He asked if he could bring the kids by. I said yes. Teddy came in and immediately found the bay laurel interesting. He asked if it was a tree or a bush, and I said it was a matter of perspective. Piper sat at the work table and wound ribbon around her fingers and told me, quietly, that she missed me making breakfast because Sable burned the eggs. I didn't say anything, just kissed the top of her head. Dex stood near the window with his hands in his pockets, looking at the street below. After a while, he said, "You seem better." "I am," I said, and meant it completely. I named the shop Still Standing Stems, which made the sign painter laugh, and which I considered a good sign. I sold seasonal arrangements and potted herbs and small bunches of things tied with jute twine. I kept a kettle on and a few mismatched chairs near the window. People came in for flowers and stayed for other reasons. That was fine with me. I liked listening. A woman named Harriet, a woman I'll call Lou, because she asked me not to use her real name if I ever told this story, came in one November afternoon, stood looking at the dahlias for a long time, and said without turning around, "My daughter-in-law has been moving money out of the joint account my husband and I had. He died in March. She doesn't think I know." I handed her a cup of chamomile. "I kept records," I said. She looked at me. "Start there," I said. She came back the following week with a small spiral notebook and a look on her face I recognized. We sat for an hour. I gave her the name of my attorney. I don't know how her situation resolved, but I know she left with something she hadn't come in with. That's mostly what the shop was. A place to leave with something. The news about Sable came from Dex, not from me looking for it. He called on a Tuesday in February, 6 months after I'd moved out, and said her name first and then paused, and then said, "She was arrested last week." Credit card accounts, 3 different clients. Her employer reported it. I was repotting a ranunculus at the time. I kept working. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant that too. Not for her, for Dex, for having to hold it. For the kids who would ask questions with small faces and need answers that didn't break them. "Are you okay?" I asked him. He was quiet. Then, getting there. "Good," I said. "That's enough for now." Dex comes by on Saturdays now. He brings coffee and sometimes a book for the kids to read on the floor in the back while we talk. He's slowly becoming someone I'm getting reacquainted with. The version of him that isn't exhausted and divided. I like that version. He reminds me of who he was at 12, before the world got its hands on him. Piper helps me arrange the Saturday bunches. She has a good eye for color, better than she knows. Teddy has appointed himself the official waiterer of everything that can be watered, and takes this responsibility with a seriousness I find deeply moving. My drawer at home stays locked, not out of fear, out of practice. Out of knowing what it costs to protect what's yours, the price of it, the effort of it, the complete ordinariness of having to do it at all. I lock it because I earned the right to. The scar from all of it isn't gone. I don't expect it to go. But there's a particular kind of quiet that settles over a life when you stop explaining yourself to people who've already decided not to hear you. When you stop softening your edges for rooms that were never safe enough to deserve them. I found it here. In a shop with a hissing radiator and a bay laurel on the sill and 2 chairs by the window. I found it in the sound of my own door locking at night, not against anything, just for me. That's what surviving looks like when you've lived long enough to know the difference, not a battle won. Just a morning you wake up in a room that's fully yours and the light comes in clean and you think, yes, this is it. I've thought a lot about the night Sable opened that drawer, not with anger anymore. I moved past anger somewhere around the 3rd month of keeping that notebook. What I think about now is the sequence of it. The way everything that happened was, in a sense, already in motion long before the recorder clicked on or the decoy envelope was placed. She made choices, small ones at first, a cardigan that disappeared, a 20 that went missing, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. None of it dramatic, none of it the kind of thing you can point to and say, here, this is where it started. But it accumulated. That's what people who operate the way Sable operated don't account for. That quiet, consistent harm leaves a trail. Not always a legal one, sometimes just a trail in someone's memory, and a spiral notebook behind the linen shelf in the posture of a woman who stops trusting the silence. And the thing about a trail is that it leads somewhere. What I know now, at this point in my life, is that character is not a fixed thing. It's something you demonstrate over and over again in the small moments nobody is watching, or thinks nobody is watching. Sable thought she was operating in the dark, but I was paying attention. I'd been paying attention for 40 years before she ever came into the picture. To students who cheated, to colleagues who took credit, to neighbors who borrowed and forgot. I know what it looks like when someone believes they are the smartest person in the room. I also know what it looks like when they find out they were wrong. Dex is a good man who got tired and stopped looking closely. That's not a crime, but it is a cost, and he's the one paying it now, slowly, on Saturdays when he brings coffee and sits with me and doesn't say much. I don't hold it against him. I held it for a while and then I put it down, not because it didn't matter, but because carrying it was taking up space I needed for other things, for the ranunculus that needed repotting, for Piper's ribbon winding, and Teddy's very serious watering duties. What I want to say, to anyone who recognizes something in this story, who has sat in a kitchen drying the same dish twice while laughter comes in from somewhere they weren't invited, is this: the records matter. The notebook matters. Not because they'll always lead to a courtroom or a clean resolution, but because writing things down is an act of refusing to be gaslit. It is a way of saying to yourself, I know what I saw. I know what I saw. I know what happened. I am not confused. That's where the real fight is. Not in the confrontation, not in the folder spread across the comforter at 2 in the morning. It's in the quiet, daily decision to trust your own perception when someone else is working very hard to undermine it. Marlene didn't win because she was clever, though she was. She won because she refused to stop believing herself. And when the moment came, she was ready, not with rage, but with receipts. That's the kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. It just shows up, steady, documented, prepared.